Greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm coming back at you after a while, a bit of a breakaway. Getting right to the point here. So tomorrow is a big day where the whole world is focused on leadership, and the leader of the free world, the most powerful leader, in history. That's where everyone's focused on right now, with the US elections tomorrow. But one thing that not many people might have understood is that today, the 2nd of November, 2020, is actually the 90th anniversary of the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I, King of Ethiopia, Emperor of Ethiopia, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. So I'm going to take some time just to be as quick as I can with this, and I've written down a few things, some points to just let you know exactly, what this day is all about. And it is quite a significant one. So we've looked at some of the astrology and just some of the connection with the Sabian symbols. I'm going to go right into that now, because I know if this video is too long, then people just tend not to watch it. So first of all, 225th in the line of King David, of King Solomon. That's Haile Selassie's lineage, his pedigree, So the story is that, if you read in the Bible, that out of all of the loves of King Solomon, the son of David, which is what Christ also referred to himself as, the son of David, like they called him son of David as well, because he was also of that same lineage. So Solomon, the son of David, out of all of his loves, he loved the most the Queen of Sheba. And she came from Sheba, from Ethiopia, to visit him and to learn of his wisdom. And the story goes that he gave her a child, and that child's name was Menelik. And Menelik returned to Ethiopia. Some say that he brought with him the Ark of the Covenant, right? That's the Ethiopian tradition to this day. There's a good Graham Hancock book on that, actually. It's called The Sign and the Seal by Graham Hancock. Way before he wrote a lot of his other stuff. I read it back in 2001. It's a really good book if you want to read about the Ark of the Covenant, the Solomonic lineage and Haile Selassie, the whole lot. Graham Hancock, boom, he's a good one, that. So, already been a couple of minutes here. Stay with me. So on coronation, 225th in the line of King David and King Solomon of the Queen of Sheba, right? And Selassie is actually through the matrilineal lineage from that. So specifically, he resonates with the Queen of Sheba, but he's a descendant of King David and King Solomon, right? Which meaning is he's also of the bloodline of Christ, Now, official titles when he was coronated, but first, he was born Rastafari, Raz meaning head or meaning prince. It was a royal title that was given to a royal child, so it also means, like royal child, right? Tafari means creator. So this is meaning like royal child creator, prince creator, Rastafari Makonnen is what he was christened at birth, right? And Makonnen meaning king, creator king, prince, divine child, creator king. So that's how he was born, Rastafari. Now when he was coronated, the official title, I'll read, by the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, Negusa Nagast, Lord of Lords, elect of God. Now that is the official imperial title of His Majesty Rastafari, Haile Selassie Haile Selassie I, Haile meaning the power of, Selassie meaning the Trinity, So Haile Selassie is his imperial title, his imperial name. He was actually christened with this name as well, but he took it on again as his imperial title. Power of the Trinity, right? So just dwell on that. You can irate, you can meditate on that one. There's a lot in that, but it's got to be a short video, so we'll move on. At age 13, he was given a military title. The military title is Dejazmach. I'm probably mispronouncing that if I know the Giz, the Ethiopian, but some of my brothers might be able to correct me on that. Elf Transporter, if you're listening, man, like I know you probably can. So yeah, that means Commander of the Gate. Now, why this is significant, why I brought this up as a military title, Commander of the Gate. Look at Selassie's astrology. I'll throw this up just for a second. So if you can see there the sun, and you can see it's at 0 degrees 40 minutes of Leo, right? It's at that very first degree of Leo. It's not even halfway through the degree yet. It's right on the border. It's right at the gate of Leo, the lion, yeah? Which is the quintessential leader of the zodiac, yeah? So, Commander of the Gate, that's where his sun's at. Now, you know that on all levels, the sun rules Leo, right? So the sun is most powerful in Leo. And someone that has their sun in Leo is going to be a really powerful Leo as well. 0 degrees right at that gate, right? Just coming out of Cancer into Leo is where Selassie's sun is. So taking a look at this, we look at the Sabian symbol for the first degree of Leo, yeah? 0 degrees Leo. The key term is conflagration, which means like a great fire blazing, yeah? And the Sabian symbol commentary says, blood rushes to a man's head as his vital energies are mobilized under the spur of ambition. An eruption of biopsychic energies into the ego-controlled field of consciousness. And it mentions in the commentary, when you look at Dane Rudyard's commentary on this, he mentions solar fire, right? He mentions the conscious emanation, right, from manas, meaning from where we get man, but which means in Sanskrit the mind, right? So this is the conscious emanation of the mind, the emanation of solar fire, the mind of an integrated personality in which Kundalini is rising, yeah? Now, the rushing of this Kundalini fire from the heart center into the head center. This is the theme of the first degree of Leo, right? 0 degrees Leo. And Rudyard also mentions the realization of Atman, or the spiritual self. And we'll come back to that in a little bit in connection with this, but stay with me, right? So we're looking at Kundalini rising. We think about Kundalini rising. Ras, again, Rastafari, meaning head creator, right? Like to create from the head. Dwell on that and just, ponder on that for a bit. But the head, Raz, head, right? The fire rising from the heart, like the blood rushing fire from the heart into the head. Now, when you hear Rastas talking, you notice a lot. They'll sing about blood and fire. This is significant, man.
Blood, 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 blood and fire. Blood, blood, blood and fire.
Mercy, Lord.
There's a great esoteric meaning in this. So, made a little notes here, right? Kundalini fire from the heart to the head, the final stages of the great work of the magnum opus, right? And we're going to get back to that opus in a little bit, right? With another one of these symbolisms in the chart for the coronation, and to do with the Empress Mekonnen, right? The Empress Menen, of Rastafari Mekonnen. Now, this alchemy, the magnum opus, right? Alchem coming from Egypt, like the dark land, right? This is where the word alchemy comes from, right? Egypt was known in the ancient times as alchem, and that art from where the Europeans mostly knew it anyway, came out of the rediscovering the Egyptian texts. That's a bit of a side note, but check it out. Now, what I'm going to recommend to you is that you Google, link in the description, I'll put it in there. You Google and look up the selection of the speeches of Emperor Haile Selassie, because there is so much wisdom, knowledge, and power, and just so much worth in that. Even just from a completely secular understanding, this man had a huge influence on history, particularly if you're interested in international law and international relations. If you are, you would be well aware of that, right? So check out his speeches. Now, I'm going to say for this, when the Kundalini fire moves from the heart and up into the head, it has to pass through the throat chakra. Now, if you hear the words and the way that Selassie spoke, this is fire coming from the mouth, right? His composure, and we're going to move into that as well in a second. I'm going to describe one of those times when he spoke, and the world shook, right? Like, historians recommend and revere this point in history. Now, Kundalini passing from the throat chakra, right, through the throat chakra on its way from the heart to the head. Conflagration, the theme of the first degree of Leo. Conflagration, the great blazing fire, which is like Leo's mane, like the lion's mane. Leo, astrologically and anatomically, rules the heart and the spine, right? It's ruling that heart chakra area, ruling the heart and the spine and the upper back, right? Now, there's two things, when someone says that someone is heartless or someone is spineless, right? You can look at some of Selassie's, enemies that we're going to look at in a bit that opposed him. And these are some of the most heartless and spineless characters in recent history, But out of this connection, right? Out of this Leo connection of the lion of the tribe of Judah, right? King Selassie, he had lions as pets that roamed around the palace grounds, right? That he could pat, that would bow to him, when he approached. Now, big cats, solar fire cats. So get back to this Kundalini, right? I'm going to quote one of the greatest Tibetan masters of recent times as well, Jamyang Khyentse Choki Lodro, in one of the many aspiration prayers that he wrote. This is one line from it, and I'm going to quote this here because I think out of the fire and the conflagration, this is one of the highest vibrations that we can give. So, having ignited the great forest fire of diligence, having ignited the great forest fire of diligence, so that the ocean of samsaric existence runs dry. Having ignited the great forest fire of diligence, so that the ocean of samsaric existence runs dry. Now, what can this mean, right? Like, okay, so, man, I could talk for ages on this, and there's just so much, but I want you to stay with me. So, once again, I'm trying to pack this in. And anyway, so having ignited the great forest fire, this conflagration of diligence, so that the ocean of samsaric existence runs dry. Now, what is it meaning with this Kundalini fire raising from the heart into the head, right? The blood rushing from the heart to the head, the blood and fire rushing from the heart into the head, right? Through the throat chakra, energizing it, right? That's the pathway. But that great forest fire, right, which is really the sense of a conflagration. It's a massive blaze, yeah, that destroys a large area. It's a huge fire, yeah. Now, if you look at the heart chakra, you know that usually it's associated with the color green, right? By standard, anyway. And it's associated with the lungs, of course, and green, the lungs, and it's also associated, like with vegetation, right? So that connection, yeah. And obviously, trees breathing, we have trees with the oxygen, us breathing in the oxygen. It's the green chakra. So, the connection there is, a lot with the forest, right? Now, it's a 12-petaled chakra. These 12 petals have 12 syllables on them, right? They're a higher vibration, but there's also a lower vibration that needs to be burnt up, right? That needs to be overcome, that needs to be stilled or transcended in the heart chakra. And there are 12 vrittis, which means literally a whirlpool or a ripple or a wave, but it has the same as samsara, the idea of a swirling or a whirling, a whirlpool, right? These 12 vrittis that spin on these 12 petals of the heart chakra that keep us drawn down into mental disturbances. So I'm going to read out these 12 now, right? We've got craving, we've got anxiety, we've got competitiveness, we've got obsession, we've got arrogance, we've got chauvinism, we've got laziness, we've got narcissism, we've got materialism, we've got hypocrisy, we've got iffiness, that like sort of always dilly-dallying, like, you can't make a decision, you're lukewarm, you're neither here nor there, like it's that frustration, like indecisiveness, the iffiness, And then lastly, we've got like burning regrets, not just regret as in just a minor regret, which can, sometimes be wise, but that kind of burning regret, that misery that keeps you, locked into this searing sense of regret, which means you get stuck and you're not moving anywhere. So you can rewind and like listen to those 12, right? Those 12 whirlpools, those 12 vrittis are what need to be overcome for the kundalini to be able to rise safely, right? Safely up. A lot of people, they push through with a lot of kundalini work without actually doing the inner work and make sure that these whirlpools are stilled, right? Before that the kundalini is able to rise, yeah? So that's when you come into a lot of danger, and you get a lot of people like having a lot of psycho-spiritual, physical, emotional problems when they're just aiming to gain siddhi, for an egotistic sense out of in attaining, kundalini consciousness. But this is what we're looking at, right? So, this great fire, this great conflagration at the first degree of Leo, this is the power of Selassie, yeah, as an integrated individual that he represents, to be able to burn through that great forest fire of those 12 obstructions and rise up into the Vajra speech, right? The Buddha Vajra, indestructible lightning, diamond speech of the throat chakra. This is where then, through those words, through the mantra, the real essence of mantra, through right speech, right? Skillful speech, as the Buddha says, that we're able then to rise up through the fire into the head and into the third eye and attain that fiery protuberance, which they call the top knot, which the Buddha had on the top of his crown chakra, that said that there was a flame that came through. In the Bible, it says at Pentecost, right, there were tongues of fire that emerged on the top of their heads. So this is that spiritual awakening. And this is all in the theme of that great conflagration fire of the first degree of Leo that we're looking at. So this is one of the mysteries that Rastafari, Haile Selassie, in his coronation, in his birth, is showing, yeah? Now, that's one mystery. You guys can look into it. Like I said, like there's so much that I could speak of here, but time is short. Like people's patience is short. So let's keep going. Right. So 1930. Another thing that we got to understand with this, right? Another thing that we got to understand with this, that they're just muck. the commander at the gate, right? What was happening? And that's a military title. What was happening at the gate of Ethiopia in 1930, right? Like when that coronation was happening, right? November the 2nd, 1930. It's in that very same year that Mussolini and his Italian fascist forces, they built a fort, right, inside Ethiopian territory, like 21 miles in or something, violating the League of Nations limits, right? They essentially invaded Ethiopia and built a fort inside, just over the border, right? Like miles into the border, but just right on the border to provoke. Selassie wasn't provoked, but they kept a very close eye on this. And this is what was happening at the time of the coronation. Fascist forces had already technically invaded Ethiopia, right? And built a fort there and violated international law. Now, these were racist these were the first fascists, right? Like technical fascists, like the Nazis, they're National Socialists. Yeah, you can call them fascists, but technically they're National Socialists. The real hardcore fascists, like the first came out of Mussolini. This was his movement. A lot of similarities, but we won't go into that now. So that's what Selassie was dealing with at the time of this coronation 90 years ago, right? This was in 1930. And then by 1935, the fascist forces of Mussolini, the Italian fascist forces invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Yeah. So all the way through, right from the start, even before this coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I, there were fascist forces at the border ready to invade. Technically, they had already pushed across the border. When they came across in 1935, they sprayed mustard gas everywhere. Now, the League of Nations internationally had agreed to ban the use of gas after the horrors that they saw from the First World War. The Italians didn't care about this because basically they regarded the Ethiopians as animals. They regarded them as subhuman according to their fascist, ideology. So they used mustard gas, again, in violation of the League's rules. And they were using machine guns, armored vehicles, all of this. Most Ethiopians that fought against them were using swords and spears, right? This is what was happening in 1935. Selassie went to appeal to the nations of the world, to the nations of the League, which Ethiopia was a part of. The idea of the League was there was collective security. If there was aggression by one nation of the League against another, then all the nations of the League were supposed to come together and repel that aggressor. They didn't do this. This is one of the major failings in history and in the history of international law. This is one of the major reasons, along with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in the 1930s also, which again should have invoked the collective security clause in the League. That failed. So this shocked and really troubled the world, right? They were like, shit, like how can we let, Imperial Japan and fascist Italy just, trample all over these rules of international law for peace and security. But they did, right? And it was a massive dilemma, controversy. So 1936, by then, the fascists had taken the capital in Addis Ababa. Selassie passed through the city of Jerusalem. Before that, he went into exile in the UK. And then, the next month in June 1936, he addressed the League of Nations, yeah? And when he walked in, right, when the Ethiopians walked in, when the Emperor Haile Selassie walked into the League of Nations, the Italians jeered and they yelled insults at him, right? They insulted him, they shouted insults, they jeered, they told him to get lost. The chairperson of the League of Nations, a Romanian guy, I can't remember his name is now, he yelled out, "Show the savages the door," right? This is how that they treated the King of Kings, or how they treated this emperor, right? with this royal lineage going all the way back to David and Solomon. It's how they show the savages the door and shouting and swearing at him, right? Selassie got up to the podium with the invitation of the president, right, who wasn't so rude. And Selassie spoke with calm composure. And he warned, amongst other things, he warned the world and the Western powers in 1936. He said, "It is us today, it will be you tomorrow." Yeah? Now, you got to remember, right? At this time, the world thought that they could contain fascism. They thought it was going to be all fine. They thought, the fascists aren't that bad. They stamped out the liberals and the Democrats, they crush all over, they shit all over the liberals and Democrats. They're destroying liberal democracy, but, at least they've got a tough stance on socialism. At least they hate socialists, so they can't be that bad. And, after they jeered and shouted and, Selassie is a savage, get out of the League of Nations, right? And they lifted the sanctions on Italy, right? Like they lifted the sanctions on Italy after a couple of months. They just let them roll ahead. It didn't punish them at all for invading Ethiopia and killing thousands of people with mustard gas, right? This is the situation. Like a couple of months later, like weeks later after this address, when they laugh at him and shout him out of the league, the whole world goes to Berlin and they celebrate the Nazi Olympics. They celebrate Hitler and the Nazi rule, the Nazi totalitarian regime in 1936 in the Olympic Games in Berlin, and everyone's like, oh, how good is Hitler? He's not that bad, Well, at least he's anti-communist. Like, at least he's tough, At least he's a law and order guy, right? Like, maybe democracy is a bit too weak, all these liberals and Democrats, like, they're too progressive. Like, Hitler's all right. Hitler's a good guy, right? He's going to save us from the evil communist conspiracy of the, Semitic bankers and, all of their blood-drinking, child-murdering, satanic rituals, which if you look up Der Stürmer, this shit is exactly what was being said in the 1920s and 30s in Germany. Look up the Stormer, the newspaper, tabloid newspaper that was backed by the Nazis, and you'll see that's exactly word for word, same as the shit that's going around today. So this is what was going on. They laughed at Selassie, they called him a savage, they said, get out, you fucking idiot. They basically patted Italy on the back. He went still to the UK in exile, and he warns them, it will be us today, but it will be you tomorrow. These fascists will not stop. You cannot trust them. They're not as all right as you think that they are. He warned in 1936, but they went and celebrated the Nazi Olympics anyway. So, there you go. So, where we're going to go with this now. I'm going to take we'll keep going with it. So, less than a year later, the UK and France, they signed the Munich Agreement, right? Because there's the crisis over Czechoslovakia, where Hitler basically goes in and takes a whole chunk of Czechoslovakia, and everyone's like, fuck, what do we do? So, the UK and France, they meet with, the Italian fascist Mussolini and Hitler, and they think, okay, let's just let him have Czechoslovakia. And then Hitler, are you going to be fine if we let you have that? Will you just stop there? Oh, sure, he said. Like, I'm not going to take any more territory. I'm not claiming anything more. We'll just have this part of Czechoslovakia. Shit will be fine. So that was 1938, right? The Munich Agreement, which is also known as the Munich Betrayal. Yeah. And again, at that time, they still thought, hey, it's fine, like, the Nazis aren't that bad, Mussolini's not that bad, the same thing, like, they keep the socialists in check, they keep the left in check, the radical left, the dangerous left, It's good to have like the Nazis and the fascists in Europe. That's fine. Um, that was 1938. Of course, we know 1939. Hitler invaded Poland. The Second World War broke out. 1940, the Germans have taken France. France is now Nazi France, Vichy France. The Nazis occupy the whole of continental Europe, yeah, and London is being bombed in the Blitz. The civilians in London are being bombed to shit in the Blitz, yeah, by 1940. That's within less than 4 years after Selassie had spoken at the League of Nations and warned them, it is us today, it will be you tomorrow. And they laughed and they jeered him out, right? 1940, like what, 1941, what happens then? Gideon Force, right? Look at Gideon in the Bible, you can see that. Gideon Force, which is an alliance of British, Ethiopian and Sudanese forces, British, Ethiopian, Sudanese troops, yeah. They invade back into Ethiopia, and by the 5th of May 1941, Haile Selassie marches into Addis Ababa, the capital, and reclaims it and declares victory over the Italian fascists. On the 5th of May 1941, which is exactly 5 years to the day since he went into exile. He was back in Ethiopia in full command, having conquered, having won victory over the fascist forces. Now you look at 5th of May 1941, what's happening to the Allies, right? Which were called the United Nations at that time. That's where we got the term United Nations. They were the nations united fighting fascism. That's how it came about. So what were happening to the United Nations of the Allies at that time when Ethiopia was liberated? They were at the worst, lowest point of the fight against fascism. They were teetering on the verge of collapse. France was under, Britain was being pummeled. America hadn't entered the war yet. Hitler had not yet invaded the Soviet Union. He was still in a pact with Stalin. They were at their strongest, the Nazis, right? And Britain was on the verge of falling into collapse and fucking either undergoing a fascist insurrection from within or being invaded from without by the Nazis. So we know that all of this came to pass, within the years that followed the coronation of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I on the 2nd of November in the year 1930, 90 years ago. Now, like in the Bible, there's many dates for a generation, but if you look when Jah speaks to Abraham, he speaks of a generation as 100 years, It's also mentioned earlier in Genesis the first that, the generation of a man will be like no more than 120 years. So you can look at that like 120 years. We're still living in this generation since the coronation of Selassie I. And, Rastas call this the generation of Armageddon, right? Like the Gideon force that invaded there with the British, the Ethiopians, and the Sudanese, yeah, in 1941, we just mentioned. So looking at this is that final generation. You hear of Bob Marley sing about this all the time, yeah? We'll move on because we're 33 and a third minutes into this. I want to go back and just mention that not many people understand as well, but this is actually an Ethiopian first, that the wife of Haile Selassie, right, the Empress Menen, this was the first that she was coronated at the same time as Haile Selassie was, yeah? So we're looking at this day as well, 90 years ago. It's also the coronation of the Empress, the Lioness of the tribe of Judah. So we're looking at the Empress Menen, yeah? And I thought this is interesting because at the time of the coronation, there was a conjunction which is quite significant, right? And it's a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto in the very same degree, right? So it's exact at the point of coronation. Jupiter and Pluto conjoined. Now, I could go on to the significance about this, but I'm just going to read the Sabian symbol, and then we'll just to sort of elaborate on that, right? To wise up on that one. So that I don't lose you. Keeping the mind sharp, paying attention. Right. So the 21st degree of Cancer, right? At the coronation is a conjunction of Pluto and Jupiter at the 21st degree of Cancer. Now, the Sabian symbol is a famous singer is proving her virtuosity during an operatic performance. Yeah, right. A famous singer is proving her virtuosity during an operatic performance. Now, look up the word opera. Opera is coming from the Latin opus, again, like the great work, the magnum opus, which is the work, the name used for alchemy, right? The great work of alchemy, which is the same as like the great work of the Kundalini rising, yeah? Opus. Opera is meaning literally plural works in Latin, right? And I look up the definition. It says opera supposes a free will and a desire to serve. Now you listen to the speeches of Selassie, you read them and you will see a constant theme about this desire to serve, to be of world service, right? And of the using of the free will in righteousness and in wisdom, right? For the goodwill and the preservation of the next generations, right? So you look at that a lot, right? But a free will and a desire to serve. Virtuoso, from the Latin virtus, meaning virtue, excellence, and skill. Great skill, mastery, and prowess in music or any other artistic pursuit. So, what do we think about that, right? Like with an opera singer as a virtuoso proving her prowess, yeah? I'm sure a lot of you would have seen, if you haven't, look it up, but like an opera singer hitting a high vibrational note and striking resonance with a glass and shattering the glass with the power of voice. Again, I'm talking about Kundalini rising up to the throat chakra, the power of the voice, right? The power of resonance and the power of a higher frequency. Rastaman vibration, positive. This is all about lifting up your conscience, right? As Israel vibration sang of. Lifting up your conscience to the higher frequency, your mind to the higher frequency, your voice, your words, your actions, your mind to the higher frequency. And this is in the symbol of this virtuoso opera singer hitting that high note and smashing the glass, right? Now, this is the image that we get at the point where there is this massive, powerful conjunction of Pluto, the destroyer, and Jupiter, the expander. Yeah, at the time of the 2nd of November, 1930, at the coronation of Rastafari, King Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie I the First. So, Rastafari Makonnen, the royal child creator, power of the Trinity, Haile Selassie I. So this Sabian symbol for the Pluto and Jupiter conjunction there is the emotional reward accompanying cultural excellence. The operatic prima donna is not merely a lone performer like a piano virtuoso, oh no. He or she is the star in a collective effort, yeah? The opera singer that's the star at the center stage, which is the theme of Leo, right? Center stage, center of attraction. You all know that if you know basic astrology. So the star at the center of a collective effort. Now we know about community, the collective, right? The society. Where Selassie spoke so much about the importance of a world community, yeah, of international morality, yeah, of society and community. Now the collective, yeah, this collective effort. Anyone that knows about Rastafari knows it's all about the collective, right? It's all about the community. It's all about being a powerful force for good in the community, for itality, you know, in every respect. So think about that for a bit, that there was this massive conjunction happening in that coronation, and we can know some of the power that we bring here. The opera is not only music, but a story, a mythos, which embodies some of the most basic images and emotions, characterizing the culture that gave it birth. Now, I'm going to cut now to a little bit, and I hope you're still with me, because this is some powerful knowledge that I'm just dropping here. And it's up to you to be able to look forward, like to go and research and build upon this, right? Because look, I'm trying to be as quick as possible, and it's already 40 minutes, right? So I hope you're still with me. Right, now there is chum, yeah? Again, I don't know if my Tibetan pronunciation is not so good, right? But chum, it means dance, right? And it's a sacred tantric dance, right? So it's like this sacred tantric opera, if you put it like this. In fact, the Sabian symbol encourages us in Dane Ruja's commentary to actually look at the equivalence of opera and of sacred drama, dance, song in India, you know, like Chinese, Indian opera, and like Indonesian, from like Balinese, all of that. It's saying, look at those, not just the Western ideas of this imagery, but check this out. So, you know, I thought of chum or kum, right? Which is the Tibetan sacred tantric dance. Some of the notes I put on this sacred tantric dance, ritual drama, right? The ancient Greeks got into this. Is actually the ancient Greek dramas that we know. These were actually viewed as a kind of like, you know, psycho-spiritual religious ritual. In fact, you know, if you look at the mysteries of Eleusis, they were given in ritual dramatic form, these sacred mysteries. So there's a lot in this when you think about the idea of, like, you know, a kind of like sacred opera, which is a fusion of drama, of song, of dance, of all of that, right? Of pageantry. Now, we're looking at the Empress here, and we're looking at the pageantry of this coronation, which you're going to see a few clips on at the end. I'm going to put that on there, you know, with some nice Irie music, so you can all like live up to that. Looking at this now, right? This chum, right? The sacred Tibetan tantric dance. It's not just the dance that they do, right? The people in that dance, they spend weeks and weeks and weeks in intense tantric ritual and intense yogic meditation before that they perform that dance in the public, which is like the climax of all of those weeks and weeks of yogic tantric work, right? It's like the orgasmic point, right? Where the energy is released, you know, as a victory of good over evil, right? Now, this is what it is, yeah, which is the energy that we're getting from this conjunction at the coronation, and this is the same as the drama and the music, and the song that's going on at the coronation of the Empress Menen and the Emperor Haile Selassie. Now, centers around the charm centers around the transcendence of the spiritual self. Now, remember when we were looking at Rudyard's commentary on the first degree of Leo, and it's talked about the realization of Atman, right? Now, the point, and this is one of the key points that are unique to what the Buddha gave, is that he showed that the Atman itself, the most subtlest point of self-identity itself, can be realized and transcended, that it's not the be-all and end-all, that itself can be deconstructed and can be transcended, in order to reach full enlightenment. So we're looking at that again, and this is one of the key mysteries that the Empress unlocks here, that complements, the solar imagery of the spiritual Atman in Haile Selassie, right? So the Empress Menen unlocks this in this conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto in Cancer, which is a very motherly, watery sign, right? Now, understanding this, right, we can go beyond even this most subtlest aspect of the self, the great conflagration, fire blazing at the gate of Leo, where Selassie's sun is, this great conflagration of fire, right, which can blaze, which can burn up even the Atman, even that subtlest residue of the idea of self. And this is what the charm, the sacred tantric Tibetan dance revolves around. And this is like the energy that we're getting here at this point in time as we celebrate 90 years of the sun, of us moving around the sun since this coronation happened, since Rastafari was crowned Emperor Haile Selassie, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Defender of the Faith, Negusa Nagast, Conquering Lion of the Tribe of Judah, Rastafari. All right. So now that's pretty much done, right? I'm gonna conclude with one thought for all of y'all. When in 1937, right? So, but Selassie's got to be kind of like, he's probably like kind of bummed out with this bit because, like he's gone and spoken at the League of Nations. They've completely just abandoned him and his country. He's in exile. They've called him a savage, shouted at him and told him to get out. Basically the rest of the world, instead of punishing the fascist Italians who were occupying his country and gassed his people, they patted them on the back instead. And then everyone went off to Nazi Germany to celebrate the Olympics of Hitler, right? So that's what's happened in 1936. And then you get 1937, it's going to be it's pretty much a big downer, for the Ethiopians and then for Selassie, right? But one of the few people they actually had a lot of support from were the African American community in the Americas, right? In the United States. And of course, as you know, in the Caribbean, right? Like in Jamaica and different parts of the Caribbean. So African American people, they listened to his message and they had sympathy with him. And because of that, he actually did a radio broadcast to, the United States of America, to the people of the USA on Christmas Day in 1937. Haile Selassie, he did this radio broadcast. Now, I'm going to read out a little bit from that, but I just thought it's interesting, we're coming up to Christmas as well, and thinking of this message that Selassie, gave to the people of the USA, and particularly, you'll read from the message and then just, see, I think it's very appropriate as we're on the eve of the US election and everything that's going along with that right now. So this is a little bit of an excerpt from the speech, right? Christmas Day, 1937, broadcast by the Emperor Haile Selassie I to the people of the United States of America. With the birth of the Son of God, an unprecedented and unrepeatable and a long-anticipated phenomena occurred. He was born in a stable instead of a palace, in a manger instead of a crib. The hearts of the wise men were struck by fear and wonder due to his majestic humbleness. Noting that, right, the combination of majesty and humility, yeah? This is what they bowed to. And you can see that combination of majesty and humility in Haile Selassie and Rastafari. If you look at any of his speeches, or his composure when you see him in film. But in all of us, in that inner Christ within all of us, born within the manger, within the heart, within the cave, within the heart, that Christ consciousness is that beautiful balance of majesty and humility, right? Which is the true royal line. So, the hearts of the wise men were struck by fear and wonder due to his majestic humbleness. The kings prostrated themselves before him and worshipped him. Peace be to those who have good will. Goodwill. Keynote here. This became the first message. Although the toils of wise people may earn them respect, it is a fact of life that the spirit of the wicked continues to cast its shadow on this world. The arrogant are seen visibly leading their people into crime and destruction. The laws of the League of Nations are constantly violated, and wars and acts of aggression repeatedly take place. So that the spirit of the cursed will not gain predominance over the human race whom Christ redeemed with his blood, all peace-loving people should cooperate to stand firm in order to preserve and promote lawfulness and peace. The words of Emperor Haile Selassie I, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, King of kings and Lord of lords, 225th in the line of King David and King Solomon, right up until the current iration in this Armageddon generation. This is the message of King Haile Selassie I to the American people on Christmas Day 1937, while the world still thought that fascism was okay and that they were a bit scary or a bit extreme, but that's okay, like we can appease them. That's fine. The world was wrong, and Selassie had warned in majestic humility the year before that it is us today, but it will be you tomorrow. So let's not let these things repeat. Blessed I in Jah. Blessed brethren and sistren, lift up your conscience, lift up yourself, elevate your body, elevate your mind, elevate your words. Hear the message that I've given with this, imperfect though it might be. We're at 52 minutes now, so I have to cut this now. But I say one last thing, that there's something called the Chakravartin, the Chakravarti king. And if you look at this idea in India and Tibet, when the Buddha was born, he had marks on his body that the wise men, they said to his father, either he will become a Chakravarti, which means a wheel-turning king, a wheel-turning monarch, right? He could become this. Now, this is basically a king that rules in righteousness, and he goes throughout the world, right? He has this wheel that appears above him, right? And he goes throughout the world, and he simply speaks, and all of the nations, they put down their weapons, and they submit, and they become his vassals, and he brings world peace just simply by speaking the Dharma, right? By speaking in authority, like the truth, right? teaching in righteousness, meditation, and insight. So this is this wheel-turning monarch. It's said that a wheel-turning monarch only appears when the righteousness of the people on earth is at a very high level. So from that, we can kind of see that it seems to be, from some accounts, that this only occurs in its fullest sense, right? In a golden age, in some of the Satya Yuga or a Dvapara Yuga or a Treta Yuga, you know. But nevertheless, King Ashoka, right, who was the great Buddhist king of the 3rd century before Christ, who brought peace to the kingdom and sent out messages of peace all the way into Europe to the the ancient Roman Republic, like all the way throughout the world. He sent these Buddhist teachers and messengers from his kingdom. Ashoka was widely acknowledged to be a Chakravartin, right? A Chakravarti king for the Kali Yuga, which is the lowest and the most degenerate of the Dark Ages, which is what we're in at the moment. So, if you look at these things, Selassie I, in my opinion, he really embodies that archetype of a Chakravarti, at least for the Kali Yuga. And if you see the influence that Selassie has had on the world, not just through Rastafari and teachings of Rastafari, through Bob Marley, right, through reggae music, through all of this, but through like his work for the Organization of African Unity, right, the messages that he delivered in his speech, like toward international law, toward international relations, in peace and wisdom and morality, all of these things, It's really amazing. I mean, like I'm studying international law at the moment, and international relations, and the impact that you look at what Selassie was dealing with, and particularly with the League, and then later on his efforts with the United Nations. You look at all of these things, there is a great significance in what he contributed to world peace and for future generations. So big ups on that. Wisdom, love, and unity. I'm gonna leave it there. Oh, and the last thing. So the wise man said to the Buddha's father, right, to Siddhartha's father, because he wasn't yet the Buddha, either he will become a Chakravarti king, a wheel-turning monarch, or he will become a Buddha, right? So the king, the Buddha's father, right, the king of the Sakyas, he said, oh, no, he can't become a Buddha. This is where we get the story that he locked up his son. He kept him in the palace grounds, right? Like not in a prison, but well, technically sort of, but he kept him within the palace his whole life up until he was like 30 years old, when he was married and had a son as well on the way, right? He never left these huge palace grounds, and he was surrounded by all of the sexual pleasure, all of the sensual pleasure that he could want. It wasn't until one time that he decided he wanted to venture out, and he escaped the palace, and he went with a chariot driver, and he saw a sick man, and he said, what is this? And the chariot driver said, this is a sick man, right? And he said, will this happen to me? And the chariot driver said, yeah, it will. Everyone will become sick at some point, right? And he saw this old man on a cane, struggling to walk. He said, what's this? He said, the guy is an old guy, he's aging. And the Buddha says, well, is this going to happen to me? Right? The Bodhisattva, technically, because he's not the Buddha yet. And again, the chariot driver says, yes, it will happen to you too. And then last, he sees a man who's dying, right? And he says, what is this, and the charioteer, he says, yes, you will die too. This is the fate of all beings. And it's on this basis that the Buddha said, what is the point of all of this riches, this kingdom, this imperial majesty, yeah? If we can still be conquered by death, by sickness, and by aging. So he thought, what I will do is I will find a way to overcome this illness of this aging, this sickness, and this death that has arisen out of this birth and ignorance. And then he decided to leave the palace, leave behind all of it, and he went and he practiced. He practiced as an ascetic in Advaita Vedanta, actually, one of the schools there, until they finally, after 6 years, in the 7th year, he sat under the Bodhi tree because he wasn't satisfied enough. He felt that the highest point he'd achieved was still not it. And that under the Bodhi tree is when he attained Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete and perfect Buddhahood, right? So in this way, the Chakravarti king is like a secular, parallel to a Buddha, yeah? But if you look right at the essence of it, you can see that the higher vibration is at that Buddha level. And what Selassie was always speaking on in his life, in his context as an Orthodox Christian as well, right, was always talking to people of the Christ consciousness within, right, within the heart, within the cave of the heart, and the rising of that blood and fire and spirit in the fire and the blood, raising up that consciousness through the throat chakra into the head, so that we have that protuberance of the top knot, of the Ushnisha, which is that top knot on the top of the hair of the head of the Buddha, upon which out of that the flame of spirit, the flame of enlightenment shoots forth out of the crown. Yeah? So I'll leave it right there with the word crown, which in Latin is corona. That's been a theme of this year. Tomorrow is going to be a big day out of it as well. Again, this is also coming out of another Pluto conjunction that happened at the start of this year. If you didn't see that, check out the video that I did. I think that was the last video I did in January, actually. One of the last. Check that out. And understand then the higher understanding of the corona, which is out of that mystery that we've looked at this coronation today, out of that first degree of Leo where the Selassie I sun is. Raise up your conscience, raise up the fire, raise up the blood and the spirit, and elevate, irate, energize yourself, and spread goodness, victory and truth in your community around you, peace and love, one consciousness, Haile Selassie I, Rastafari, Om Namah Shivaya, boom, bless up.
Chant down Babylon now. Chant down Babylon kingdom. Jaja me say chant down Babylon now. Babylon take the mother of all and abomination of this earth. Babylon it out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Chant down Babylon kingdom. Jaja me say chant down Babylon now. Hear what I'm saying.
What the man say, Abby? My locks cover my head. All I see every day is just bloodshed. Girl are killing her, girl are for a piece of bread. Oh, mama gonna tie her belly for her son. Come make we chant down Babylon. I tell you make we chant down Babylon. Me say me fling them out of sea and the shark don't see. To them give the hog and the hog not grab. Put them on a line, say them don't love fight. I'll me show them little love, them a off and a pop. Show them little love, them a off and a pop. Make we chant down Babylon. Tell them make we chant down Babylon. Come me say broke too poor, man me can't go home. Throw 2 stone in a room. Tell them why me mash down Rome. Tell them why me can't go home. Come make we chant down Babylon. Babylon a wicked man and a finnegan as I would say. Come and make we chant down Babylon. My friend William Garden, the other one Paul Boger, the prophesy Marcus Garvey. River run dry, the coconut trees are quailing, banana trees are drying up. So the prophet fulfill as I would say, yeah. Come and make we chant down Babylon. Come and say no backstabbing. Come and say no backbiting. Yeah. Chant down Babylon. Come and make we chant down Babylon. Flee from the city, cause the city has been set up on a fire. In the time of trouble, they gotta call up unto Jah. God woe be unto them that steal my sheep from out like pastor and scatter them in the city. Woe be unto them, I would say. As the water cover the sea, so as the righteousness cover the land. But make we chant down Babylon. Sing it, make we chant down Babylon. No wicked can come fit up iron and flesh. Jah shall make them stumble and fail. Righteous man of the stand. Show them that the righteous man of the stand. We make we chant down Babylon. Because we show them the hog and the hog not grab. Show them the sea and the shark don't see. Put them on a line and them don't look.
Deliver me, oh my God, from my enemies. Oh, I flee unto thee to hide me. Cause me to hear thy love and kindness in the morning. For indeed do I trust. Cause me to walk in thy way. For I lift up my soul right up to thee. Teach me to do thy will. For thou art my God, thy spirit, it is good. Lead me in uprightness.
among the gods of the earth. How long will judge unjustly and accept the person of the wicked? Now defend the poor and fatherless, judge. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked, I beg you. For they know not, neither do they understand, they walk on in darkness. All the foundation of this earth are out of course. For I have said...
with full defense now. Oh, yeah. Wow, 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 yeah. All right now. Hey, all right now. Oh, yeah. Wow, 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 yeah. All right now. Whoa, hey, all right now. Firm up, man, and don't pretend on my behalf, y'all. Take no joy off, y'all. Cause when you look in on me Rubenic eyes, you see the time get civilized. Stop the susu-de. Stop the susu. Children, what do you do? No carry on, no bring on. No spoil up the Israel farm. Now the Jews will burn you. Swell your figure swell up when burn you. Swell you. Wow, wow,